Welcome. We are so thankful to have you here on, I assume, kind of a cold January day. I'm Tammy Thompson, Deep Roots Outreach and Conference Manager, and I am just so delighted to see you all here today. So as most of you know, this is one of my favorite days of the month. I'm excited that you joined us as we explore today the Twin Pines Conservation Education Center and grounds. It is the shortleaf pine forest, and we are so excited to share that with you today. This site is one of a kind in Missouri and cared for lovingly and carefully by Missouri Department of Conservation staff. Once nearly decimated by logging, this area is being carefully restored to ensure the native shortleaf pine forest return to their original glory, or as close as we can get to it. I think you will be amazed by the exceptional Missouri treasure. I am just so excited to share it with you today. Next month, we will take Native Plants at Noon back to the Anita B. Gorman Discovery Center and catch up with Alex and Sydney. I don't know about all of you, but I think we've all missed them. So during the program today, if you have questions, please note those in the Facebook comments or in the Q&A tool on Zoom, and we will get to as many of those as we can. I'll be using the chat feature to send you any links, plants mentioned, anything we can that they mentioned, we'll share with you in real time. And be sure to stay to the end to have a chance to win a prize. So let's get this party started. First of all, I'd like to express a big thank you to the Missouri Department of Conservation for their partnership on this series, everything they do to restore wildlands in Missouri, and what they do to help encourage and empower people to plant more native plants. And we want to thank you too for your support and the feedback you give us to improve on this series and all of the programs that we have. Thank you very much. So before I introduce our speakers, I want to mention that this site's education center is not open until April, just the building. The grounds are still open, and in April, the entire site, including the education center, will be open. So with that, we're going to welcome Riva Dow, Mike Keeley, and Gary Gogner from the Missouri Department of Conservation. Riva is the Twin Pines Conservation Education Center manager. Mike is the district supervisor, and Gary is the forester for this treasured site. As you will quickly see, the three of them have tremendous knowledge and passion for the restoration of this site and what it means for the area and the wildlife that it supports. So with that, I'm going to let Riva, Mike, and Gary take it away, and I'm going to roll tape.
Good morning. Welcome to Twin Pines. I'm Riva Dow. I'm the manager here at Twin Pines. And Twin Pines is one of our main things is about the history of the Ozarks and especially the lumber industry. So today we're going to talk to you about shortleaf pine. It's a nice cold January day. It's a little windy out here, but please bear with us. So when the settlers first came, the European settlers first came to the Ozarks, the hills and valleys around here were all covered with large shortleaf pine. And so about probably the 1880s, after the Civil War, and we need to be rebuilding and such, the logging became very important, and this area did. And large meal was put in at Grandin, where I believe like over 30,000 acres was purchased before any people or equipment or anything showed up. And then it was a company town owned by one of the large milling or lumber mills, and they were cutting like 70 acres a day was being processed. So lots of lumber was coming in, and most of that was moved by the trams, railroad, the narrow gauge railroads. The trams were put in, so the local people were hired to cut the trees. They would load them on the trams or on the wagons, the trains on the trams, and take those to the rivers, and sometimes just left them on the trams and transported to Grandin. And Grandin was a very important part of processing all of the lumber. And they stayed in business to around the early 1900s, and by that time they had cut off most of the timber in around the Grandin area. So the mill was moved to West Eminence, and it continued there until about 1919, I believe, 1920ish. So this time period is from like 1880 to 1920 when the timber was being cut. And after the timber was all cut, the locals were left with lots of erosion, lots of bare land, and that's when we get into the timber management and MDC's part of the restoration.
Action.
Hi, I'm Mike Keeley, forester at the Conservation Department, here with
Gary Gognet. I'm a forester, private lands forester for Shannon Carter in Ripley in Oregon County.
and we're standing here at Twin Pines, and we're inside the interpretive walking trail that's located on the premises here. And in this area we did our shortleaf pine restoration. That's still in progress, but we've made great strides in, and it's a good demonstration of where it possibly could have looked like pre-1880. Like Reva said, this habitat was prevalent in the Ozarks and was removed largely with logging and pioneering of the area. But if we back up a little bit, shortleaf pine is Missouri's only native pine. It's prevalent in the Ozarks, kind of south of I-70, and we're at kind of the northern range of shortleaf pine. And if we look at it, the species itself, it has 2 to 3 needles per bundle or fascicle for you botanists. And this is what you might get from our nursery if you purchase a seedling. And notice this J-shaped root. Now that J-shaped root sits underneath the soil, and what that does is if the top of the seedling is burnt off with a fire, it has buds in that J-shape that will shoot up again and resprout. Shortleaf pine, being fire adapted, is one of the only conifers that resprouts like that. So it lives in this fire environment that evolved with the Native Americans using fire over thousands of years. And so it's a pretty neat species in that regard. As you look through here, some larger seedlings that are growing. And this is in the shade. If you plant these in the full sun, Gary, how fast? They're a pretty fast growing tree, wouldn't you say?
Pine is relatively fast growing, and they prefer alkaline soils. And one interesting thing about the needles is there's 2 and 3 needles per bundle on each seedling, on each tree. But they're fast growing. They prefer the drier sides, alkaline soils, like I mentioned, and they'll actually outgrow oaks and hickories on those sides.
Yeah, and which is, we've got a lot of in the Ozarks. If you guys are up north, kind of beyond its range, and if you have maybe more limestone based basic soils with higher pHs, the shortleaf might not perform as well in those sites. Also, shortleaf pine kind of self-prunes itself up. As you can see, these are forest grown, but even in an open grown situation, they prune themselves up naturally. So they don't really make good windbreak trees as much as maybe a white pine or eastern red cedar might do.
And another interesting thing about the pine is it'll, and as Mike mentioned, it'll re-sprout after it's been top killed or it's been cut, but only the smaller trees. And shortleaf pine has to come back from a seed, and that seed has to fall down on bare mineral soil, and then it needs sunlight for it to germinate and take off growing. That's kind of unique for pine. It comes back, it has to come back from that seed, and they will re-sprout. The smaller trees will re-sprout, and as a fire adapted species, that's important because a fire will top kill these small trees, but they'll go ahead and re-sprout and come back, and they'll actually grow faster after they've been top killed because the root system is already in the ground.
Yeah, and so, you know, after Rita explained, you know, the big mill came in over the turn of the century, late 1800s. They cut off the shortleaf pine, and what happened was the hardwoods that were already kind of sitting in wait in the understory, as you see these brownleafs in the background, the oaks kind of took over our forest in the Ozarks. Shortleaf pine was relegated to a lot smaller position, and so what we've done in the last since the department's been around and is trying to restore the shortleaf pine to the dominance it once was, because there's a lot of species that depend on pine, that pine woodland ecosystem for its habitat. A lot of species like pine warbler, or what we reintroduced was the brown-headed nuthatch recently. It was extirpated from Missouri and we've reintroduced it. So we are trying to get more habitat that's suitable for those sweetest species. And so when Gary started managing this area 20 years ago, this was a regular forest that had pine and oak in it. So Gary, how did you restore this area?
Well, I think restoration is the key word there. And coming into this area, and as a forester, my goal is to restore the natural communities that historically grows on that site. And everybody knows that, you know, your east and west aspects are going to have different species, different conditions. And as a forester, I want to restore, for example, on your west and south sides, you know, our pine, white oak, and post oak. So looking at this area, that was our goal. We're in the pine oak woodland dissected plains. As Mike mentioned earlier, it's like we're in a historic pine range. Ozarks, the shortleaf pine is the native species in the Ozarks. So looking at this area, this stand we call our management units, this was overstocked. They had a lot of hardwoods in here, hickory, and looking at this, okay, we're on this pine oak woodland savanna type area. So, and it's a fire dependent natural community. So through timber sales, doing some timber stand improvement, chainsaw work, we were able to develop this structure.
And then when did you start reintroducing fire into it?
This is probably early 1990s.
Okay.
That we did started to burn. The first burns, and this has had, I think, maybe 4 burns on it. So,
okay.
And we've got a good structure here. There's a lot of leaf cover here, but in different areas, there's grasses and forbs coming up.
Yeah, and so that prescribed burn, that ground fire that we're doing, kind of reduces the dominance of woody plants and opens it up for more sunlight for grasses and forbs, species that are important for pollinators, that are native to this ecosystem, basically when it was managed predominantly with fire by Native Americans. And so this hasn't been burnt in about 3 years, and as you look through here, you start seeing a little bit more hardwoods that are resprouting. And if we stop burning, basically our diversity of our grasses and forbs would start to disappear. And so what we'll do here, what's due to burn this year, we'll do a burn to kind of knock those woody resprouts back and provide more sunlight in the forest floor. And you can see through the burning and then the silviculture, the harvesting that Gary did, you can see a real open understory. So we've got the canopy layer, and then a real open understory, so all that sunlight could get down to the forest floor to promote diversity.
And Mike, the importance of this kind of structure is for wildlife, and turkey in particular. The grasses and forbs that's going to develop underneath the canopy is where the turkeys are going to be in the fall, coming in bugging areas. And for example, in October, a turkey's diet is less 2 or 3% of acorns. And if you think about that, all the acorns are down on the ground in October. Well, the turkeys aren't eating acorns. The majority of their diet is insects. So the turkeys, this woodland structure that has the grasses and forbs, is going to be insect rich, and grasshoppers, different insects, and the turkeys are going to be in here in the fall. So when we're talking woodland management, prescribed burning, you know, it's a basic form of wildlife management, and turkeys in particular.
Excellent. Well, I hope you gained some knowledge here. If you're looking to see some of this, come on down to the Ozarks, to Twin Pines in Winona, Missouri. There's also 2 other sites that I'll let you know about that are excellent. One is managed by Pioneer Forest, the Leo A. Dry Foundation, and it's the Virgin Pines on Highway 19. And these are actually native old growth pine that had never been cut, and it's right along Highway 19 north of Emmett. Then south of here, the Forest Service is doing an extensive pine restoration work in their Pine Knot program, and they have a driving tour, if you look that up online, that is also excellent. So come on down, visit the habitat, and see what we've been talking about.
Here at Twin Pines too, there's an interpretive hiking trail, and this area has been managed intensively. We've got different prescriptions that the trail goes through. For example, you can see even age management, uneven age management. You can see areas that have TSI, of course the burn woodland here, and it's like a 1.5 to 2 mile hiking trail that's available, open to the public, and there's maps and interpretive literature that goes with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, quick invitation, if you would like to learn more about shortleaf pine or the timber industry here in southern Missouri, you're always welcome to stop by Twin Pines. We are open from April to November from 9 to 5 each day, Tuesday through Saturday. And we have several displays outside and inside that tell of the milling and the lumber industry here in Missouri. Thank you so much for joining us today.
That was absolutely outstanding. We really appreciate your patience as we record things outdoors. Nature can be noisy, and as you can see, the Twin Pines area is easy to get to because there's a highway. Looks like a pretty busy highway right next to it. So Riva and Mike and Gary and I think Neil, if you guys would all like to come to the stage, as we call it, we would love to start taking some questions. We've got a pretty full Q&A. There's Mike. There's Gary. That was outstanding. There's Riva. And I don't know if we have Neil on or not, but we have a pretty, that was outstanding, you three. Thank you so much for freezing. Riva, your poor eyes were watering. Mine do the same in cold wind. Thank you so much for taking the time to show us around this absolute treasure that I didn't know even existed down there. So I'm going to open up the Q&A, and I'm going to just trust you guys. I know you know each other well. I'm going to trust you guys to tell us or to take whatever question. I know you all have different expertise levels, so I'm going to start with Rocco. Rocco asks, and if we don't know, we just say we don't know, and we'll let you know. He asks, what is the Latin name for shortleaf pine?
Gary, you want to take that?
Yes, sir. It's Pinus echinatus, and that's the genus and species. The genus is Pinus, which incorporates all evergreen pine trees. Then the species is echinata, which is our only native pine species that we have here in Missouri.
Thank you. I knew you would know. Janet asks, where is Twin Pines located? And she may have gotten the answer. That was early on in the broadcast, but I think it's definitely worth repeating because this is a treasured site. That's probably you, Riva.
Yeah, I'll answer that one. We are located we're right on 60 Highway, which goes across the southern part of the state, middle of the Ozarks. It runs east and west. We're about an hour and a half east of Springfield, if that helps.
Oh, yeah, that's not as far away as I thought.
Kind of a lot of people know us because of the current river in Jack's Fork. That's kind of our known area.
Oh, those are treasured sites. Absolutely. All right. Outstanding. So Val asks, and it looks like Val asks, and you guys might know more about how to answer this. She wrote, so I assume the shortleaf pine is not adaptable to Southwest Missouri's cherty areas. More of the chert plains, I assume.
Yeah, we don't, this shortleaf pine as you go west kind of plays out as you get around the Springfield area. Red cedar is more prevalent on their glades, and we don't see much native pine there.
All right.
Not saying you couldn't get it to grow in your yard perhaps, but there would be a chance that it would not like a site in that area.
So if you were taking care of it and kind of managing the pH, the alkalinity, perhaps, but it's not going to thrive in that
Possibly
natural.
not. Right,
Okay.
right.
I'll just add something to that.
Sure.
If you look at, a map of Missouri, the Ozarks, what we consider the Ozarks, South Central Missouri, that is about the border line of where you'll find shortleaf pine.
Okay. And how many acres are you guys trying to restore there? I was going to ask that.
Well, we manage for pine on all our areas. So we always favor shortleaf pine in our areas. The four counties that we manage in mine and Gary's district, we have about 160,000 acres of state land.
Wow.
And then Gary works with all the private landowners. So because pine is not as predictable in terms of being able to sustainably reproduce it, we really are conservative on how much we cut out of a forest. So we always manage for pine. The pine restoration, where we couple the silviculture, the timber management with the burning, is on a smaller percentage of ground. Maybe 10% of that we will go ahead and introduce fire, just because of the limited resources and places where we could put fire safely and address social concerns and smoke management and stuff like that.
Fair, that's certainly a
And
consideration.
Tammy,
Yes, sir.
the fire is a natural or a fire dependent natural community,
Mm-hmm.
but it'll do just fine without fire. And the prescribed burning develops the herbaceous layer, the grasses and forbs.
But as a forester on private lands, I want to try to restore shortleaf pine on its native sites. And, generally we're talking about west and south slopes, and the ridge tops is soils have similar, they're shallow soil, drier soils. So those are pine sites as well. So maybe not just, we don't know the acreage, but we're going to try to put it back on the site where we can.
Yeah, that's a lot of acreage. I had no idea that was so widespread. That Rocco actually asks kind of a follow-up question to what we're talking about. He says, what is the understory in terms of bushes and perennials and ground cover? So, I don't know, Gary, that would be you maybe?
You're going to find, a range of species mix in the understory. And, we have a lot of dogwoods, red buds, or there'll be some, there'll be some, like rusty black halls, maybe some red buds, and there'll be oaks and hickories in the understory as well. And, the grasses and forbs, there's lots of forbs, little blue stem, big blue stem, Indian grass will be in, your restored pine communities, and just other native species.
Okay. Val asks, how many times can one resprout?
I'd say that resprouting ability is really unique to shortleaf pine. And when the pine seedlings are small, a prescribed fire through there, they will top kill those, and they'll resprout, and they're kind of gets energized when they resprout because the root system is already in the ground, and they'll resprout and outgrow the seedling that was top killed. But because of the root system in place, they'll grow faster. And when that pine seedling gets over, say, maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches diameter, right close to the ground, then the next fire isn't going to top kill it, and it'll remain on the site and start growing.
Yeah, and the number of times it could resprout is dependent on the vigor and health. So if you had a brand new seedling and it got top killed, it might not resprout at all. If it's a 10-year-old seedling, it could resprout probably multiple times and be able to deal with it. But if it was coupled with things like drought or repeated top killing every year, it would die.
Yeah, oh, that's fair. Therese asks, how do you use fire to prevent burning the pines?
Pine is a fire adapted species, and during the restoration phase, those fires are going to be fast moving through there. So there's not going to be putting a lot of heat on the pines, but they have thick bark, and that thick bark protects the cambium layer from getting scorched. But if you're restoring a natural community and you use prescribed burn 2, 3, 4 times, well, each successive burn is going to be a cooler burn. It'll be cooler and faster.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
And once that you get the grasses and forbs there, that fire will be real flashy. It'll just burn through there fast.
All right. Just did a burn at my property over the weekend, and it goes really quickly when you have the shorter grasses. All right. Teresa asks, how large do these trees get? How tall?
They get as tall as the soil quality kind of determines tree height, and they'll get as tall as the oak trees, which can be up to 150 feet potentially. Typically, they're somewhere in that 60 to 80 foot range. Wouldn't you say, Gary, that's the average?
Yeah, and depending on the site quality, the pine trees that we were seeing there at Twin Pines, they was probably average from 12 inches diameter at breast height there might have been some 18s and maybe a scattered 20 in there. And those trees are probably between 60 and 80 years old. But pine, shortleaf pine is a very long-lived species. And on Pioneer Forest up there, Neil could talk about it, but they've got some trees up there that's 250 going on 300 years old. So they're very long-lived species, you know, very, very adaptive and good growers.
And they're probably about 3 foot in diameter, would you say, Gary?
Yeah,
The biggest ones.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's pretty impressive tree.
And I think you mentioned this already, but I think it's worth repeating. Janet asks, what is the northernmost limit for shortleaf pine?
Here in the Ozarks, I mean, that line is probably going to be south of 44 and down to the Arkansas. The shortleaf pine will go into Arkansas, but I-44 and, you know, around Salem up there, that's kind of the northern range, and it goes over east towards the Mississippi. Maybe I can't name the towns over there, but not quite to the Mississippi River, and then over towards Springfield, and then down, makes a loop into Arkansas, and, you know, just the Ozarks. When you think of the Ozarks, that's the typical range.
Springfield South, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it could almost get the historic range almost got to St. Louis, almost to I-70. Yeah, and
Wow.
there is, I don't know if you saw in the news lately on there's Tower Rock, which is a natural area in the Mississippi River, and there's native shortleaf pine at that point in the Mississippi, and it does cross over a little bit into southern Illinois. They have a very little bit of native shortleaf pine.
All right. And then the last question we have in the queue is, are there trails through the virgin forest you mentioned? And the second part is my responsibility. How do we find that virgin forest? We will definitely put link, or when we send you the resources, everybody, when we send you resources, we will send you links for all of the plants, animals, and the locations we've talked about. So anyway, are there trails through that virgin forest?
I'm not sure if Neil made it on the call, so we can answer that for him if he hasn't.
Okay. I don't see him in here.
Okay. So the virgin pines are open to the public. Leo A. Dry Foundation is the largest private landowners in Missouri. And they own ground in Shannon, mostly in Shannon County, but Reynolds County and some other counties. Their virgin pine site is along Highway 19, north of Eminence. How many miles, Gary, would you say north of Eminence? About 5 or 10?
That's closer to 15.
15, okay. And there is a sign off of Highway 19 that is, you know, shows you where it is. And then there's a county road that you can drive up into. And I think it says driving tour there. If you drive up that county road, there's a small parking lot, and off that parking lot is a small walking trail. I'm not really sure the extent of that. I think it's a small loop trail, but they also manage with fire. So that site's pretty easy to walk around. It's, you know, it's pretty open due to the fire. So it's a good place to visit.
All right. And we will, again, we will be sure to link those sites in our resources so that you all can know where you want to go on your next road trip. We got one last question. We'll take this last question and just popped into the Q&A, and then we will wrap up. Anne asks, and I'm going to assume, Anne, that you are in a preferred area for shortleaf pine. But her question is, would shortleaf pine be a good choice for some eroded sandstone areas in pastures that are also drainage areas to small creeks, something to stabilize the soil?
So if it's if it's in Missouri, did she give the town or county?
Nope, I don't know exactly. I don't know where exactly that is, but if I'm gonna assume she's in an area that would be shortleaf pine,
Okay.
southern
Yeah.
Missouri. So we can assume that, and if not,
Right.
the answer is probably no.
Yeah. So yeah, if it's sandstone and eroded, shortleaf pine is good. You know, this Civilian Conservation Corps back in the actually used pine a lot to replant some of the degraded farms after the turn of the century and depression and stuff like that. So it is good for that. It's fairly fast growing. You might mix in some other species whenever we work with landowners on tree plantings or on our own. We always try and mix some species in to increase the probability something actually does take on, and help stabilize the site.
Great. And actually popped in the chat, Eastern Oklahoma.
Okay. There is some shortleaf pine in Oklahoma, so I'm not really sure. The more you get out of the native site, the more you get off of the native soil, the probabilities start to increase for failure. Not that it can't happen, but the probabilities start to stack up against you that it's not going to work out.
Right plant, right place.
That's right.
We always try to encourage people. All right, so that's the end of our Q&A. Thank you so much, you three. We are so thankful for you braving the cold. Also, just telling us about this treasured site and the obvious care that you take to restore. I had no idea how big an area you all were working with, but I want to encourage our viewers to plan a trip down to these areas. They are treasured sites, and I know the locals probably kind of take it for granted, but these are kinds of sites that we don't get to see for those of us in the Kansas City area, and we have viewers from all over. So now it's time. You guys are welcome to stay on, but now it's prize time, and I'm going to share my screen. So we give a prize at the end of each Native Plants at Noon. And we want to thank you guys. Oh, I wanted to let you all know that if you are interested in a tour, it looks like Riva is going to host one in January. So we'll cover that in at the end too. So the question for our prize is, and I want you to put your answer in the chat. So the question for the prize, and Gary mentioned it twice. What type of soil does the shortleaf pine prefer? So put your answer in the chat, and my colleague Dina will choose a winner from that. And in closing, we want to thank you all for joining us today for Native Plants at Noon on the road with our friends at the Missouri Department of Conservation. And I want to let you all know about some upcoming events. Riva, that was just logged out, is hosting a tour of the shortleaf pine forest on January 28th at 10 a.m., 10 to noon. So that's in person. So if you want to sign up and see that, we would encourage you to. Oh, lost my screen. Then on February 2nd, we are going to do Native Garden Management Made Simple. This is the last of our Lunch and Learn series. And then finally, we will see you all back here. Oop, I have the wrong date. February 16th for Native Plants at Noon back at the Anita B. Gorman Discovery Center. So if you've missed any of our episodes, you can find them all at deeproots.org. We record and post each one while you're on our site. We would be grateful if you would consider making a donation to Deep Roots as well to help offset the cost of producing educational content. So let's announce this winner. This is the winner wins an eight pack of native plant note cards by Kansas City local artist Nancy Waugh. And the winner is Debbie Eck, spelled E-C-K. Debbie, if you would send me an email at Tammy, Tammy, at deeprootskc.org, let me know where we should be sending your prize. Again, Gary and Mike, you guys made this so much fun, and so quick too. You guys just get in there and out of there with this, all the pertinent information. Thanks for joining us today. And everybody have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on February 16th for our next one. And remember, what you plant matters. Bye, y'all.